Hello, members of the Greater Milwaukee Association of Realtors, and welcome to another episode and adventure of From the Park Bench with Scott Bush. It's a beautiful day, as you can see. The birds are out, the sun is out. I don't know if the camera can pan the sun, but it is out today. Yeah, very, very good. We're going to get a new backdrop soon, but we have kids from the organizations that we provide funding to from the Youth Foundation paint our backdrops. So we're going to work on a new one. But anyway, aside from that, my guest today is a friend of mine, Casey Clickner, and Casey is the Vice President and Director of Broker Development at Shorewest Realtors. And Casey's been involved in fair housing instruction for many, many years. And April is Fair Housing Month, and I realize that a lot of our members are well versed in fair housing rules, fair housing laws, but there's always those nuances and there's always those other things that we should always revisit just to limit our liability and become better agents. And fair housing is really a good business practice. But Casey, before we start, just overnight my house skyrocketed in value. You know why?
No, why?
The neighborhood kids had egged my house, so that was.
So it went up in value?
Yeah.
You know, eggs are expensive.
But that was my dad joke, real estate joke of the day. So. But I also should mention that Casey was honored with a very prestigious award a couple of years back. The Wisconsin Fair Housing Network recognized Casey for his work in fair housing. So let's get right into it, Casey. And some of the more subtle things that agents seem to have difficulties with, and a couple come to mind. Someone asked an agent, "Is this a safe neighborhood?" What are the fair housing ramifications of that?
Yeah, that's always very touchy subject and difficult to handle. The first thing I always let agents know is one thing we always need to remember is we took a 72-hour course to get licensed. We went through all the rules and regulations and laws, and we know there's 13 protected classes. We know that there's 7 national protected classes. You've got your race, color, religion, national origin. You've got gender, which now also includes sexual orientation and gender identity. And then you've got, I'm going to remember all of them now, and you've also got handicap and familial status. And those are the 7 national protected classes. And then in Wisconsin, we have 6 additional ones, which would be your marital status, your lawful source of income, your age, your ancestry, sexual orientation, which was actually on the Wisconsin state law list before it was on the federal list. And then you've got your victim or status as a victim of abuse or sexual assault or stalking. And that mainly comes into play when with rentals, where a landlord cannot discriminate or refuse to lease or extend a lease for someone who is a victim of sexual assault or stalking or abuse. And the reason I like to go through those is we know those, we see them on almost every contract that we use, but the consumer doesn't know. If we walked up to any buyer or seller, any consumer on the street and said, how many protected classes are there in Wisconsin, they'd be lucky if they could come up with 3 or 4. So it's very important that we get the message out. It's why they're on our contracts, to show our buyers and sellers that there are 13 protected classes that you cannot discriminate against. And that's why sometimes we will get those questions that you mentioned out in the field, where a buyer might look at a home and look at the agent and say, is this a good neighborhood? Or I only want you to show me homes in good neighborhoods. And that sometimes can be a trap that we don't want to fall into. So the great way to answer a question like that is with a question. And if someone says, is this a good neighborhood? A simple question is, what do you mean? Or I want to see homes in the areas of good schools. Well, tell me a little bit more about that. What do you mean by a good school? So you need to get that out of them to make sure that they're asking you a question that really isn't rooted in discrimination. But by asking the right questions, sometimes you will find that they are discriminating.
Because sometimes they're blatant enough to say, well, you know what I mean. I don't want to live by these people are those people. And when that comes up, that's when you say, well, look, this is what my role is as a realtor. This is what the law says. This is what the contract says. I can't be a party to discrimination.
Right, correct. And reminding them of the 13 protected classes, letting them know that, look, we don't designate areas based on any type of race, color, religion, any of those 13 protected classes. That we can give them factual information. If they say, hey, I want my kids to go to, I want them to be in a good school district. Well, tell me a little bit more about that. What are good schools to you?
What's a good school district?
What's important to your children? A lot of times we let our own personal feelings get in the way and our own biases. We might be showing properties in an area where we grew up and where we sent our kids to those schools, and they loved the school. So I might say, Scott, let me show you homes in this area. This is where my kids went to school. They loved the school. Your kids are going to love it, but not necessarily so. Maybe my kids were heavily into academics and the arts and the sciences, and your kids are into academics and sports. But this school district is not that great when it comes to sports programs. So I'm sharing information with you based on my bias when it's not the right choice for you. So we just have to ask those questions. What are you looking for in a school? What's important to you? What's important to your kids? Let's get some factual data. There's many online services out there that rate schools and give all the information about those school districts and the schools. And then as an agent, I would even suggest that you do a tour of the schools, talk to the principal, talk to the teachers, so you can ask the right questions and get the right answers.
I always tell agents too, and maybe you could elaborate on this, be proactive. The more tools you have in your toolbox, the better agent you are. So if you may have a system of keeping information on accessing school data throughout the various municipalities in our area.
Correct.
Graduation rates, sports, the arts, whatever it is, so that you have that information
right.
readily available.
And, hopefully when they say, is this a good school? Hopefully they're asking us, what is the graduation percentage? How many go on to college? What are the academics like? And hopefully they're not asking us, what's the racial makeup of the school? Is there a police car parked outside every day? Is this going on? Is that going on? Because that could be a discriminatory question.
But is the neighborhood safe? I want to know if it's safe.
I can get you information on that, and I can even suggest some websites or to contact your local police department to get you all that information.
Okay.
I'd rather
Realtors
either
get
state
pressed.
factual information or point them to the place where they can
Right.
get that information.
Because I know realtors do get pressed from time to time. Hey,
Right.
come on, you know what I mean? Is this a safe neighborhood? And
Right, and I don't like those subjective terms.
realtors are not experts in crime data. They can provide the information.
Correct.
Okay. Let's just say I'm a Hispanic person and I want to live in a Hispanic neighborhood. What could be wrong with that? Because, I'm telling you where I want to live.
Yeah, I've used that as an example a lot, where you might have a buyer come through your open house, you build a relationship with them, they want to work with you, so you do that buyer consultation with them, and they say, hey, look, we're moving up here from Chicago. We live in a Hispanic neighborhood in Chicago. We love it there, and when we move up here, we want to live in a Hispanic neighborhood, and we want you to show us homes in the Hispanic neighborhoods.
That'd be okay, right?
Could you then do that? No. And the reason is, since when did we start labeling neighborhoods as Hispanic?
Especially in the real estate business,
or
right.
by religion or by national or anything like that. What do we have, maps in our offices where we say, here's where Hispanic, no, that would be discrimination. So we would have to let that person know we really don't designate areas based on national origin or race or color, anything like that. But what we can do is tell me a little bit more about where you're going to work when you move up here. What do you want your commute time to be? Are you looking more for an urban setting or suburb or out in the country? We would then encourage them to talk to people at your new job. They can give you some ideas on areas. We really want them to come to us and tell us where they're interested in looking.
Yeah.
That's pretty easy with a local buyer. They know, hey, here's the school district I want to live in. Here's the community I want to live in. With relocation buyers, sometimes you just got to ask a few more questions.
Getting back to the Hispanic neighborhood example, we don't have data that says, well, a neighborhood can be Hispanic if it's what percent? 10, 20, 50, 70% Hispanic?
Yeah, right. What would make a neighborhood Hispanic?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Real life, you could probably refer them to maybe the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or something like that.
Right.
For information.
Correct. And a lot of your online community sites will give a makeup of the community in that. And give demographic information and things like that.
Right. And if you have fair housing questions too, we have a lot of resources on our website. The Wisconsin Realtors Association has a lot of resources on their website. Talk to your broker, call the Realtors Association, talk to me. But Casey, is there anything else you want to talk about today?
No, I usually like to keep these vodcasts nice and short. People's time is important to them.
A new story.
Well, yeah, there was, back in 2018, not that long ago, there was a Newsday investigative report. And if you Google Newsday Real Estate Investigative Report, you'll see this video, which is very enlightening. And what happened was Newsday is a newspaper out in Long Island, New York. And between 2017 and 2019, they did some investigative reporting where they sent white buyers to meet with 93 different real estate agents. And when a white buyer met with a real estate agent, then they sent in either a Hispanic, Asian, or a black buyer to meet with the same real estate agent to see if that buyer was treated differently than the white buyer. And they did this 93 different times, so 186 meetings with agents. These buyers had video cams and microphones, and it's very disturbing what they found. And overall, to see the video is incredible, but they found that 19% of Asian buyers were discriminated against by the real estate agents. 39% of the Hispanic buyers were discriminated against, and 49%, almost half of the black buyers were discriminated against. How were they discriminated against? Well, overall, the study showed that white buyers were showed 50% more houses to see. And then they showed that the minority buyers, many of them were asked to get pre-qualified before they could even look at a home. Where the white buyers, the agents started showing them homes right away. They had video of some of these agents saying, to the white buyer, you don't want to live in this neighborhood, or you don't want to send your kids to these schools. And then they'd meet with a Hispanic or black or Asian buyer, and those neighborhoods were just fine. So the whole time you're watching this, you're thinking, oh my God, if that were me or my company, that would be terrible. And we shouldn't have to think that, boy, I wouldn't want to be on the news. We should just think, this is the way.
Do things the right way.
We should do it the right way all the time.
Right. So is it okay as a real estate practitioner if I treat people in a rude, discourteous, and obnoxious way? Is that okay?
You're not going to get much business.
Right. But it's probably okay as long as...
You do it to everybody.
You do it to everybody.
Treat everyone the same, whether it's treating them nicely or treating them like Scott does, and that is treating them poorly.
Yes, exactly. A little bit of a trick question that I kind of knew the answer to. So I want to wrap up with this story. It's humorous, but it's there was a Shorewest agent years ago. She's retired now, Margaret Henningsen, African-American agent, and she was on floor time, and she got a call from an older white couple, and I'm going from memory. This happened quite a while ago, but they were talking to Margaret on the phone about listing their home, and they said, "Well, we don't want to list our homes with. We don't want to sell our homes to, somebody that wouldn't fit in the neighborhood and things like that." And I think they became almost blatant, or they did say black people, I believe, and of course Margaret Henningsen is black. And,
which they couldn't tell because they were on the phone.
On the phone.
So here they're sharing this with Margaret.
Go ahead with the story.
They're sharing it with her, and they're saying, yeah, we want to sell our home because all of they said blacks are moving into the neighborhood.
Right.
And Margaret had the wherewithal to say, great, when's a good time I could come over and take a look at your house? knowing that she wasn't going to list the property, but knowing that these sellers needed to be educated a little bit on what the fair housing laws were.
Right.
And she said it was worth the time and the trip just to go over there and see the expression on their face when they answered the door and saw her standing there. And they said, look, I'm not going to list your home, but you need to know that whether you list it with someone else or even list it on your own, you cannot discriminate and based on these protected classes. So
Margaret used to teach fair housing too for the Realtors Association, and she had that experience actually happen more than once.
mhm.
And a couple times too, she did say she did get the listing and gave them an education. So
Sometimes we feel that, holy cow, it's year 2025 and discrimination isn't happening, and it still is, and we have to be aware of it. And as professional realtors, we just have to make sure that we're conducting our business in a professional manner, legal manner, and in a morally correct manner to take care of our customers.
great. Well, Casey, I really want to thank you very much for sharing your time and your expertise with the members of the Greater Milwaukee Association of
You bet.
Realtors. Appreciate you being a guest on Scott Bush from the Park Bench, Greater Milwaukee Association of Realtors vodcast. GMA members, thank you very much.
Yeah.